Mary Lou MacDonald, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. Taoiseach, it is time to scrap the television licence, and your government needs to face up to this reality. People's trust and support for RTÉ and the licence have crumbled. People see the fiasco of excess and waste at RTÉ and they feel taken for fools. They see the lack of accountability too, and frankly, they've had enough. This collapse in public confidence isn't helped by the revelation that Toy Show the Musical, which lost €2.2 million of taxpayers' money, hadn't received formal approval of the RTÉ board. And today, we have key figures behind that debacle still dodging accountability to the Oireachtas Media Committee. Now there's arrogance. No wonder hundreds of thousands of households haven't paid the licence. People are voting with their feet. Taoiseach, do you seriously propose to chase those hundreds of thousands of taxpayers through the courts, to threaten them with a fine or even a custodial sentence, or will you act now? Surely we can all agree that the court's time and resources are better spent on more serious matters. By the way, not one of the top brass at RTÉ have been held to account for wasting taxpayers' money. So it is unthinkable that thousands of ordinary people would face court while highly paid executives get away scot-free, having wasted millions. The collapse in public confidence presents a serious challenge in how we fund sustainable, vibrant and diverse public service media into the future, and yet governments all over the place. Instead of being straight with people, we've had mixed messages and contradiction to beat the band. Minister Catherine Martin says one thing, Paschal Donoghue another, Minister Michael McGrath yet another. You yourself have described the TV licence as outdated, that it belongs to a different time, and you're right, Taoiseach, so abolish it. Get on with your job. Minister Catherine Martin talks about not rushing this decision, but you've had the Future of Media Commission report on your desk for 2 years, and yet you plod along with a licence that is outdated and belonging to a different time. Not rushing is one thing, standing like a deer in the headlights is quite another. So we need a bit of common sense, a bit of cop on here. The television licence should be scrapped and direct exchequer investment should be put in place to fund public service media. That's what the Media Commission found. That's what's contained in Sinn Féin's motion tonight. Tá tacaíocht den phobal tar éis titse as a chéile den ceadúnas telefíse. Ba ceart deire a chur leis an ceadúnas telefíse agus inéistíocht stáit ciste a chur ina áit chun man seirifíse puiblí a bhuainú go hin bhuanathe. Our proposal to be voted on tonight represents the best approach in delivering a sustainable and successful future for public service media. It's also the fair approach for households and for families. This is a positive way forward, and it's certainly not something that should divide the Dáil. So government must end the merry-go-round of dither, of delay and contradiction. Now, Taoiseach, is the time for a decision. So will you scrap the TV licence and replace it with exchequer funding to ensure that better future for public service media?
Thank you, Deputy MacDonald. Taoiseach, please.
Thanks, thanks very much, Deputy, and happy St. Valentine's Day, and to everyone in the House. I think, Ceann Comhairle, it is very clear that we have significant problems in RTÉ. We see a culture of poor governance when decisions were not made or made properly. We see a culture of arrogance from some of the senior people who are in charge of that organisation. And we also see a wider culture of entitlement, the belief that the revenue from the licence fee should belong to RTÉ, either entirely or for the greatest part. A sense of entitlement and thinking that went back to an era when we had to fly Aer Lingus and had to get our electricity from the ESB. things have moved on a lot since then. There's a lot more to public service broadcasting than RTÉ. I don't agree it's the case that there's been no accountability, Deputy. A number of people have resigned from their posts. People have been called in before the Oireachtas Committee and have accounted for their actions. Those who haven't yet should, in my view, and I want to make that very clear. And if any evidence of criminality or breaches of corporate law or company law are picked up in the audits, they will be referred to the Corporate Enforcement Authority. To date, Deputy, that has not occurred, but it may yet occur, but to date it has not. In the meantime, Deputy, we will decide as a government on a new means of funding public service broadcasting. That has to be a method that is fair, a method that says to people who use and benefit from public service broadcasting they should bear some of the cost. That is only fair. And also says very clearly that it isn't all about RTÉ. It's also about other forms of public service broadcasting, including that provided by local radio and local media, reporting on council meetings, court reports, for example, and also more widely supporting bursaries for journalists, encouraging international correspondence, something we don't have enough of when you look at our news in Ireland. And I think all that's really important, because it's anything that I've seen change dramatically over the course of the past 15 or 20 years in politics. It is how people get their information and their news. And more so than ever, reliable sources of information are required because people simply cannot trust news and information that they see online. And unfortunately, so many people do. And that's to the detriment of our democracy, not just here, but also abroad. In relation to the TV licence, Deputy, it remains the law. The money doesn't all go to RTÉ. Some of it goes to the Public Service Broadcasting Fund. It goes to Irish language programming, goes to children's programming, goes to news. Some of it helps to pay staff in RTÉ who have nothing to do with this at all. I believe must feel very demoralised at the moment because of all that's going on. But I believe Deputy people should obey the law, and I believe Deputy people should pay their taxes and pay their charges. And I think it would be an affront and an insult to the majority of decent law-abiding citizens who have paid their TV licence fee to now grant an amnesty to those who didn't. I think it would be profoundly unfair. And I think, Deputy, if you did grant an amnesty to those who didn't pay, you would then come under pressure to provide rebates for those who did pay. And I wonder, have you considered that? Is that also your policy?
MacDonald?
Taoiseach, what's an insult and an affront to everyone is your clear inability as a government to take a decision. You've had a report now for 2 years. It has made a very clear-cut recommendation, the abolition of the television licence and direct exchequer funding. This has coincided with a collapse in public confidence in RTÉ and a consequential non-payment of a TV licence that you yourself has described as outdated and from another era, and I agree with you on that. So the question here isn't the necessity of quality public service media in RTÉ and beyond. We agree on that. The question here is a question of sustainable funding, and your government has to call it, and you have dithered and delayed and contradicted each other. And worse than that, it seems you are now proposing that thousands, tens of thousands, potentially hundreds of thousands of people would be dragged through the courts for non-payment of a licence that is outdated and from another era. The answer to this is for you to do your job, take a decision, and the only logical decision is the abolition of the licence and direct exchequer funding. It is that clear-cut.
Well, Deputy, it's not. There are a number of options. One option is direct exchequer funding, but that is funding that might otherwise go to education or health or to pensions, for example, and would potentially give future governments undue influence over RTÉ if RTÉ were funded directly from the exchequer. And we know that there's somebody in this House who might be head of government in the next government who's suing RTÉ at the moment. And that would be a huge conflict of interest, in my view, to have people who are suing RTÉ deciding how much money they get paid. That's not the kind of democracy we want. That's the kind of thing we're starting to see happen in the United States and other places, and I definitely would not want that to be the case in our state. An alternative option, Deputy, is the possibility, for example, of having a household media charge, one that's collected by the revenue, another option that needs to be considered. And those options are under consideration by government, and we will make a decision on that this year. But it will require legislation, and it will require systems to set it up. So in the meantime, the TV licence remains the law. People should obey the law. They should pay charges that they're liable to pay. They should pay their taxes, and that's a very simple thing. And I don't believe in tax amnesties. I never did. And I don't believe that the policy you're pursuing is the right one. I think it's a return to left populism, quite frankly. And I really think it's a mistake.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Holly Kearns, Leader of the Social Democrats.
Taoiseach, the words RTÉ and crisis are now almost synonymous. Repeated scandals have hugely damaged public service trust and confidence. Kevin Backhurst and key members of the board are back in front of the Oireachtas Committee today, and there's a long way to go, I think, to really rebuild the trust in RTÉ. Senior management have a really important role to play in this. We need a strong public service broadcaster that delivers an important public service journalism in the public interest. To do this, we need a credible plan that addresses the enormous corporate governance failures that have been identified. There must also be accountability for what has happened and full transparency going forward. But the management team can't do this alone. To proceed, they need government to make a decision on reform of the TV licence, because in its current form, it simply isn't working, and I think that's something that we all agree with. Sinn Féin have proposed scrapping it and replacing it entirely with exchequer funding. I disagree with that position. Frankly, I don't think it's been thought through. Making RTÉ entirely reliant on state funding opens it up to risk of political influence. That flies in the face of the entire purpose of an independent public service broadcaster who plays a key role in holding the government of the day to account. Not to mention that it would leave RTÉ's budget vulnerable to cuts during times of economic shock. It's not a tenable solution. The Social Democrats have proposed a three-stranded funding model comprised of some guaranteed multi-annual exchequer funding, a public charge, and a levy on social media companies. The reality is we need public service journalism now more than ever because of the misinformation and the disinformation spreading like wildfire on social media. It's undoubtedly damaging our democracy. For that reason, we believe social media companies should pay a levy to support public service journalism because trusted, independent media is more important now than it ever has been, due to social media platforms' inability to moderate their own platforms. A TV licence in an era where an increasing number of people stream content on their phone and on their tablets is completely outdated. So it should be rebranded to a household public service journalism charge at a lower rate than the existing TV licence, but collected in the same way. In our view, it's not appropriate for revenue to be tasked with collecting something that isn't a tax. Taoiseach, incredibly, we're still waiting for the government to outline what it intends to do. You say you have to wait for 2 more reviews before you indicate what your plan is, but I think that just has the hallmarks of kind of delaying tactics. We know that Minister Catherine Martin favours exchequer funding and the Taoiseach prefers the broadcasting charge collected by revenue, but I'm asking what your position is and when we can expect the government to finally agree its proposal. You say this year, but when this year?
Thank you, Deputy.
Thanks, Deputy. I can't give you a date today, but I think we should make a decision on this in the coming weeks and certainly in the coming months. I agree that at a time when misinformation and disinformation is rife, at a time when that is undermining democracy here and around the world, it's really important that we fund public service media and public service broadcasting, and that can't just be about RTÉ for reasons that I think we'll all agree. The current model is to fund it through a mixture of the exchequer and the TV licence. We will examine the options as to whether we go for a full exchequer system or a system like you propose, which is combined exchequer funding and the household charge. And we'll have to examine that and weigh up the options and decide how that's done. I think there will always need to be an element of exchequer funding. The current TV licence exempts people on very low incomes and older people. I think that would have to be the case for any household charge too. But I think the point you make is very valid. There is a concern, even if I may personally favour an exchequer funded model, and that does happen and does work in some countries, I would have a genuine concern about an exchequer funded model that not this government, but perhaps a future government led by the deputy opposite would have full control over the funding of RTÉ and public service broadcasting. And there's a gross conflict of interest in somebody who is suing RTÉ deciding how much funding RTÉ would get. That would be a big problem, I think, for our democracy, and we'd have to bear that in mind.
Kearns?
Thanks, Taoiseach. I think, look, the reality is this has been discussed at length, and I think in general the public are really sick of the same debates happening over and over again, the same conversations, and people are starting to tune out. And I think that kind of dampens the public mood for an appetite for a public service broadcaster and really the value of all of that. People are sick of hearing about it. There really is a limited number of options that are available to you, and at some point you're going to have to pick some of them. So you say you're in favour of some exchequer funding. We agree with you. We think there should be some guaranteed multi-annual exchequer funding. Can you outline your position on the continuation of a licence fee, but a reformed one that isn't based on a TV, because we know that that's dated? And could you also please outline your opinion on the potential for a charge for social media companies who are, seem to be incapable of managing their platforms and the spread of misinformation, because it seems like you are yet to come to a position on this. So I would ask you to consider the Social Democrats' position on this. Some guaranteed multi-annual exchequer funding, some TV licence fee reduced and rebranded as a public service journalism charge not based on televisions, and a charge for social media companies.
Taoiseach?
Thanks, Deputy. The current position, as you know, is that the TV licence is the law, and I encourage people to pay it. I always have. And it isn't just about RTÉ. It's about Irish language broadcasting, public service media, children's programming, and also the Broadcasting Fund, which helps support a lot of our broadcasters and creators who are in the private sector and have their own small businesses too. And I think we need to bear that in mind when we're deciding whether or not to pay the TV licence fee. It is linked to television at the moment. That is old-fashioned. I know there are people who've suggested that it be linked to having any sort of device. I don't think that's any more practical, quite frankly. The possibility of applying it to households could make sense, and that's the proposal that you're making as a party, although I think you would still need to exempt pensioners and very low-income households, because otherwise it would be very regressive, and I think you're agreed on that too. Any change requires legislation, will require a system to be set up. So this year there will not be a new system, so the licence fee will continue to apply at least for the entirety of this year. And we have to consider all those options. In terms of a levy on social media companies, I'm not sure that's a great idea, Deputy. We already have a levy that's going to fund the Media Commission, which is imposed on, or due to be imposed on digital companies. We have VAT already on broadband, for example. We have corporate profit taxes, which are being increased this year. There's already a number of taxes there, and I'm not sure that would be the right approach to add on additional tax on top of that.
Thank you, Taoiseach. On behalf of the Regional Group, Deputy Dennis Naughton.
Thank you, Ceann Comhairle. Taoiseach, last week I attended the launch of I Am Number 17 campaign, a determined initiative by 17 change makers who shared their stories, shedding light on the realities faced by patients with rare diseases in Ireland. They're committed to enhancing our understanding of rare diseases, demonstrating that such conditions are more common than many of us believe. Rare diseases include cystic fibrosis, Duchenne muscular dystrophy, Huntington's disease, alongside most cancers, especially those affecting children. Rare diseases are collectively common, affecting at least 1 in 17 people in Ireland, equating to at least 300,000 people. This figure very likely underestimates the true prevalence when considering rare disorders. In a nation as small as ours, it's almost certain that we have, know, or have encountered someone affected by a rare disease. Yet the path to an accurate diagnosis is fraught with challenges. The lack of specific knowledge and expertise often leads to significant delays in receiving proper treatment, placing a heavy burden on families and carers. Many rare diseases emerge early in life, with a staggering 30% of children affected passing away before their 5th birthday, though many cases are not identified until much later. The anguish of being ill without a diagnosis, or witnessing a child suffering without recognition, is profound. Thus, securing an accurate and swift diagnosis is critical. However, 37% of patients endure a gruelling 5-year quest for a diagnosis, often after being treated for unrelated conditions due to the complex nature of rare diseases. Irish research reveals that children with rare diseases occupy hospital beds 25 times more than other children, not to mention the significant care and cost burdens placed on adults with rare diseases. Taoiseach, the potential of genomics in addressing these challenges is immense, offering hope for quicker, more precise diagnoses. Yet our efforts to harness this potential through a national strategy for genetics and genomics medicine has been hampered by recruitment issues and the absence of a designated home for the new Central Genetics and Genomics Laboratory. That laboratory is vital for the future of genetic testing in Ireland, yet plans for its relocation from the CHI in Crumlin remain unclear when the new Children's Hospital opens, with no alternative site being identified. This oversight jeopardises the effectiveness of our health service, leaving a crucial component of our national strategy in limbo and exacerbating existing inequalities. I implore you, Taoiseach, to personally address this critical issue. And let's ensure that the I Am Number 17 campaign leads to meaningful, lasting change, improving the lives of those affected by rare diseases in Ireland.
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach, please.
At the outset, I just want to thank Deputy Naughton for raising this important issue, and I know rare diseases is a cause that the Deputy has championed for many years now. I know the effect that rare diseases can have on many patients living with them, and at times it can be difficult to assess the appropriate medicines, technologies and diagnostic tools. We made commitments in the programme for government to ensure increased focus on rare diseases and people living with them, and we're now developing a new rare diseases strategy which will renew that focus. A rare disease policy unit has been established in the Department of Health. A National Rare Disease Steering Group was also established in December and has met 3 times since. The development of a new strategy will look to the future and the needs of those patients and families living with rare diseases and diagnosis. We expect to have the new plan ready well before the end of this year. And the voice of patients and families will be central to the development of this policy, and a patient forum has been established to ensure exactly that. In relation to the specific issue of the national laboratory capacity for genetic testing, we're fully committed to advancing genetic and genomic medicine in Ireland and building a national service. The central theme of the national strategy for accelerating genetic and genomic medicine in Ireland is to strengthen infrastructure and to drive advances in genetics and genomics. This includes actions in relation to laboratory capacity. In particular, the National Genetics and Genomics Office is working to enhance existing laboratory infrastructure to promote the development and the use of innovative technologies for testing, sample tracking and reporting. And a National Centre of Excellence in Genomic Testing and Bioinformatics will be established as a single entity, and that will sit under the governance of the HSE. The National Centre will work in collaboration with relevant clinical specialties and existing laboratory capacity in alignment with the new health regions. A genomics laboratory operating model is now being developed, and as part of this, for 2024, there is the development of a national genomic test directory and for rare and inherited diseases.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Naughton.
Taoiseach, last year the Minister for Health allocated $2.7 million to kickstart the National Strategy for Genomics and Genetic Medicine, aiming to bolster our health services capacity in genomics. However, progress has been stymied with recruitment shortfalls. At last count, only 10 of the 18 roles have been recruited under last year's allocation. The 8 outstanding roles are now not going to be appointed. They have been merged into 5 roles planned for recruitment in 2024. So by the end of 2024, there will be 15 new hires under the strategy rather than the planned 23 at that stage. And if the failure to recruit staff wasn't bad enough, as I say, there is no plan in place for where we're going to house the new main laboratory for genetic testing in Ireland when CHI Crumlin is relocated. Will they be left wandering the halls of an empty Crumlin hospital after everything else has moved out? Taoiseach, we need answers and we need action, and we need it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
That some of the posts that were approved in 2023 were affected by the temporary pause on new recruitment. A new workforce plan for 2024 is being developed by the HSE, and the HSE will be able to increase its total staffing levels by between 2,000 and 3,000 over the course of this year. This will include genetic counsellors and the development of the Genomic Resource Associate role to help patients navigate the genetic and genomic care pathway and improve the coordination of care. The 2.7 million provided to fund the implementation of the National Strategy for Genetics and Genomics included the establishment of the National Office of Genomics and the appointment of key staff. In relation to the location of the new lab, or whether it remains in Crumlin or not, I don't have a satisfactory answer for that to you today, Deputy, but I will discuss with the Minister for Health and come back to you as soon as I can.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Catherine Connolly, please.
Wat an fille winter na Palestina. Agus an cinenne díthú atá ar siúl ag rialtas Israel faoi láthair. Agus in áiríre slácht gan trúa gan taise atá ar siúl. Inné want tú úsáid as focail láidre, focail cántach ó híomh Israel, agus chum fáilte raibh na focail sin. No ag dúirt Minister Coveney freisin gur stát bradach atá I gceist maidir le Israel, agus chum fáilte raibh sin freisin. Ach tá rud eile ag teastal go géir agus sin leadership. Sin an rud atá ag teastal go géir inis agus barta le na focail láidre cántach sin. Taoiseach, I want to return to Palestine. And I welcome the strong words that you used yesterday, and you talked about winter no rialtas Israel dalta le mira agus revishin dalta le gialtas, blinded with rage and blinded with revenge. I have a different opinion on that. I think they have a full comprehensive plan. But I welcome your strong words, and I welcome the words from Minister Coveney that we're dealing with a rogue state. And what we need now are actions. What are we going to do as an independent sovereign state, a republic? What are we now going to do? We have stood idly by when the amnesty report was published in February 22. We were uncomfortable with the word apartheid, weren't we? We didn't like to use it, so we ignored the amnesty report. We didn't join in with South Africa when they took their case to the International Criminal Court. We stood by when 6 Palestinian organisations, vital work on the ground, were designated as terrorist groups. In the last 4 months, we have stood idly by while genocide is perpetuated in our name. We have stood by while UNRWA has been demonised, although I welcome the decision not to withdraw funding. We have stood idly by as Israeli settlements have increased in the occupied territories. We have overwhelming evidence from the ground up and trusted organisations that's what's happening in our name. And I will just read from Action Aid, which is the latest organisation to contact us. And they tell us Israel has created an unbelievable hellscape in Gaza. People are starving and so on. It's all there. I'm sure you have it, Taoiseach. What I'm asking for now is leadership. Number one, the EU-Israel agreement has to be stopped. We have a mechanism for doing that, and I need to hear that you're going to lead on that. We need to stand with South Africa. We need to stand with Amnesty International, which have clearly said that Israel operates an apartheid regime. We need to recognise the state of Palestine. If not now, when? We need you to make clear to President Biden what you have said in this stall, that America is a rogue state and he must stop sending arms. I beg your pardon? I beg your pardon, that America needs to stop sending arms to Israel. We need to stand up and be counted. How many more deaths are we going to read out here as if they're simply numbers? I'm asking you, Taoiseach, on occasions you've said very strong things. I agree with those, but you have not made your words mean something.
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
Garmagad as the quid ceshti hachta agus cahamid suscoga nish tá an Omerca dini boss agus gortaha sa Palestine nish. Deputy, this morning the Spanish Prime Minister and I, Pedro Sanchez, wrote formally to the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, expressing once again our deep concern at the deteriorating situation in Gaza and calling for an urgent assessment of whether Israel is in breach of the human rights obligations under the EU-Israel Association Agreement. The letter states that the expanded Israeli military operation in Rafah possesses a grave and imminent threat that the international community must confront urgently. If the Commission concludes that Israel is in breach of its obligations under the agreement, then the Commission should propose a response, although suspension may well require unanimity of Member States. Deputy, I want to set out perhaps very briefly just 7 very concrete actions this government has taken in relation to this crisis in the Middle East. First, we were one of the first governments in the world to call for a ceasefire. Second, we've increased our aid to the UN and to UNRWA when other countries have suspended it because of allegations that some of the staff were involved in the October 7th massacre. Third, we've used our voice at the EU and the UN in support of the rights of Palestinian people. Fourth, we've sought that there be sanctions against violent settlers in the West Bank at EU level. And if we can't get agreement with that at EU level, well, then we'll go ahead and do it with other like-minded EU member states. We have intervened in the International Criminal Court case on Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories, and the Attorney General will travel personally to The Hague to make our case on the 22nd of February. We've joined with Spain just today in calling for the suspension of the EU-Israel Association Agreement, and we are in discussions with other EU member states about recognising the state of Palestine. But I want to be clear and honest with you, and I want to be clear and honest with all of the people in this House and the Irish people. None of these actions in themselves will bring about an end to this war. No war has ever been ended by a court order or by the expulsion of an ambassador or by the suspension of an agreement. To think so, frankly, is just make-believe. There are only 3 ways in which a war ends: military victory by one side over the other, a stalemate, a ceasefire, like they've had in Korea for 75 years, or a political solution. And our focus is on the political solution, trying to work with our partners and allies, and even countries that are not our partners and allies, in the Arab world, in the EU, across America, and indeed in the global south, to bring about a ceasefire. Because that's what's needed, an immediate ceasefire so the killing can stop, so aid can get in, so the hostages can be released, and they should be released, moving towards a permanent ceasefire and then a permanent political solution, which is the establishment of 2 states side by side, living in peace with each other.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Connolly.
You've called for the suspension of the agreement. I welcome that. That's progress. There are many things we could have done up to now, and we didn't. We stood idly by. I think we're out of keeping with the people on the ground of Ireland who are crying out for leadership, who are saying, please don't do this in my hospital in Galway today. But I know the people of Galway will forgive me, because they've expressed over and over that's what's happening in our name in Palestine by the Israeli army and the government is simply intolerable. That Netanyahu would think he can get away with a ground invasion, where we have President Biden saying, oh, don't do that unless you have a plan. They're not strong words. That's something you need to make crystal clear to him when you go to America. I didn't call for the withdrawal of the Israeli ambassador. I'm finding it very difficult to stick with that decision on my side, because that ambassador has had free rein propagating utter propaganda on our airwaves with no balanced opposition to that, repeating that they're a democracy as if that gives them an entitlement to slaughter and carry out genocide. And that's what we're listening to on our airwaves. I am now reviewing my decision in relation to that. At the very least, that woman and that ambassador should be called in here before the Dáil and made account for the words that she's using. That's what diplomacy is about, in my view, at this point, when we're looking at genocide.
Thank you. Taoiseach.
Thanks, Deputy. I just really hope that we don't make this conflict or these terrible events that are happening in the Middle East to be any way about us, because it's not about us or the differences between the different parties here or between the government and the opposition. It's about the civilian population in Israel and the civilian population in the Palestinian territories too. And I disagree with you on two accounts, Deputy, even though I think we agree on most things. First of all, absolutely nothing Israel is doing at the moment is being done in our name. You've suggested that twice or three times. Absolutely nothing the State of Israel is doing is being done in our name. And I want to make that very clear as the head of government and on behalf of the government at least. And secondly, I don't accept that we're standing idly by. I've set out 7 concrete actions that we've taken already in my initial response. And when I meet representatives of the Palestinians, of the Palestinian Authority, when I meet other leaders from other Arab countries, they thank us for the stance we're taking. We're seen as a country that is showing leadership on this issue. But we have to do it in a way that makes sense, that is smart, that allows us to continue to try to bring countries with us. I remember the first European Council meeting after this conflict started. We were in a minority in calling for a ceasefire. We're now in the clear majority. We have to make sure that we're able to bring people with us. Not people who already agree with us, but people who don't yet, but might into the future.
Thank you, Taoiseach. That concludes leaders' questions for today, and it allows us to move to questions on promised legislation.